Welcome to this week's episode of the Prep Athletics Podcast. I'm proud to have Coach Billy Thom on, and Billy is the head coach at Millbrook, which is located in New York. And Billy grew up in a basketball family. Dad's a Hall of Fame high school coach in New York, and Billy, as a 17-year-old, went to Davidson to be a student manager. Happened to be the year Davidson went to the Elite Eight with Steph Curry. So we go behind the scenes of kind of his time there, being director of basketball operations for 2 years at Davidson, and then getting the job at Millbrook. And he shares all about Millbrook and how it's a holistic approach they take to their student athletes, and it's more than just basketball there. They've got a zoo on campus with endangered species. It's a cool place. Went to visit there a couple of years ago and got to see all the animals, and just give some great insight on class, on how they actually develop kids as well-rounded beings, and how they help get their kids recruited in college and kind of his process there. So really enjoyed this. Last thing, Billy is a social worker, which is a little bit different too among the coaching staff in the prep school world. So we get into that as well. So enjoy the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Prep Athletics Podcast. This is Corey Heights.
Some battles. I'm not sure if they got us. If they did, maybe.
So you will get better as a player during that year.
So it was kind of exciting, like, oh yeah, somebody wants me.
Billy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Corey. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so where did you grow up, and what got you into coaching?
Yeah. Grew up in Cold Spring, New York, so about an hour and 20 north of New York City. My dad was a high school basketball coach, so kind of grew up in a gym as well, public school in Westchester County. He's had his own high school, college coaching career, the New York State Hall of Fame, all that good stuff. So the idea that coaching was an important part, basketball is an important part of my family life, has sort of been present since birth. My dad and mom met playing college ball at St. Rose, which is no longer open, but they met on a team bus, and they're at their first road trip freshman year. So it's sort of been ever present. Grew up coaching some youth basketball, things like that in high school. Was not a great player myself, and so tried to figure out how to best to get into the world, and found my way to Davidson College as a student manager, and then a student assistant, and then on staff, and kind of took off from there. But definitely a part of life throughout my early life.
Yeah, and that's something that not a lot, but some coaches do, is they go the manager route at a D1 program. And tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what was the best part of being a manager there? What was the worst part?
Yeah, well, I kind of stepped in crap right away because my first year was the Elite Eight run.
Yeah.
So that was pretty fantastic, being able to sort of enter and have to keep pinching yourself, have your assistant coaches say, "Hey, Billy, this isn't how it always is, right?" Undefeated run in the SoCon and win a couple tournament games, go to Detroit, win another tournament game. That was just a lot of fun. And so that's sort of the sexy part of the journey. I think the thing I really enjoyed most was being in a place that really sort of pushed me as an student, right? And as a human, but also had really high level basketball. And so Coach McKillop was tremendous pretty much from my sophomore year on at having me be a part of a lot of our program. I'd sit in coaches meetings. I'd do a lot of the pre-video scout work as a sophomore or junior in college. I was still a student at Davidson and going out and like talking with one of our assistants at the local Rotary Club or a community event. And so I'm forever thankful that Coach gave me a lot of those opportunities. I think some of it was also good timing. We didn't have a huge manager group when I first got there. And so just being able to kind of put my head down and try to make myself indispensable, that opened up a lot of doors as well. But hardest part, I think, is that you're still a college student, and I felt a real affinity to college coaching at the same time. So you're trying to manage those two things. And, when I graduated, I stayed on staff as director of operations. But I wasn't hired until July or so when Terrell Ivory left to go to Colgate. And, so I had been on a graduation booze cruise with some of the guys on the team, right? 4 months earlier, 3 months earlier, 2 months earlier. So right? Managing that change in relationships, which I think helped a lot. At boarding school, you wear a lot of hats, and so it helped me a lot professionally that young to understand, okay, I'm a coach, I'm an advisor, I'm a teacher, now I'm a therapist, I'm a clinician, right? And just that mix of things. I kind of got thrown into that right at Davidson too.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back. I don't want to gloss over that Elite Eight run because that's what a lot of people want to talk about too. Because you saw history, right? You saw Steph Curry at his prime in college. So, what did you notice about him that he might have done differently than what you saw before that, or what you've seen since?
Yeah, twofold. I think number one, on the court, obviously he makes a lot of shots, but his vision, him making plays and seeing it day in, day out in practice, making plays that were it was almost sort of preternatural, right? He could see something happening 4, 5, 6 moments before it happened. So just at a different level than some of our other guys. And we had Jason Richards on that team, and he ended up making the Heat roster and then blew out his knee. But he led the nation in assists that year. And so seeing those two together, it was just like a different level of feel and vision and guard play that I had obviously ever seen before, coming from a small public school in Westchester County. And then I think the second piece was when he wasn't making history, as you said, he was just one of us. He was just a guy that hung out and felt just as comfortable being at his apartment on a Friday night with some of the other guys on the team who we lived with than sitting watching him wow LeBron James in an NCAA tournament, right? Courtside. Like that duality to be able to be one of the best at what he did, at what he does, and also be a really humble, general human being. I didn't notice that then, for sure. I was 17 when I got to campus, right? But looking back on it now, it's pretty remarkable, right? I've been around some other high-level people since then, and he's still in the upper echelon of success to humanity ratio that I think is hard for some people when they hit that level of success.
Yeah, and then lastly on this, like, could the team, could the coaches, could you tell the buzz growing throughout the season? Like, because Davidson's a small campus, small student body outside of Charlotte, like, could you feel did the campus know what was going on? Did you know you were in a moment at the time, or only in hindsight did you realize that?
Going into winter break, I think we were 2-6, 3-7, something like that. 4-point loss to Duke, right? A couple of possession loss to UNC. We were up 16 on UCLA out in Anaheim and ended up not holding on and winning that game. We had a shot to tie it at NC State, where we ended up playing our first two NCAA games later that year and missed and went home 2-something. We were ranked 25th in the nation, and we lost at Western Michigan, right? The day after we got that national ranking. And so I think everybody in the program knew that we were close, right? That we had to do some things, clean some things up. I just remember Coach talking a lot about potential versus production as we started the conference season, coming back from winter break, right, from holiday break. And then I don't think the buzz outside of the program, outside of the locker room and coaches' offices started until we started to run the table in the SoCon, right? And then all of a sudden you're 5-0. You beat, a pretty good UNCG team. You're 8-0. You beat a pretty good Charleston team, right? All of a sudden, whoa, we're 12-0 with just a few conference games left here, right? And that's where I think a lot of the buzz picked up nationally, right? Because we had those close calls on the national stage earlier in the season, and all of a sudden, we're written up on, we're the front page of the college basketball page on ESPN.com. Right at that point, or something like that. And then we got down at UNCG. They had a really good big, Kyle Hines, and we played there. And we were down maybe 18 or something in the second half, and came back and won that game. And I think getting in the bus there, we were like, okay, they're sort of the second team in the conference right now, and we just figured it out in a really hostile space. And that felt like a real click too. But then as we grew, certainly in the NCAA tournament, the buzz was ridiculous. It was,
Yeah.
And then coming out of that the next year, I just remember at the Citadel, old brick locker room, and these sort of old fold up windows at the top, people throwing things through the window to try to get Steph to sign it,
Wow.
as we're 20 minutes after a game, and sneaking them from locker room to bus and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it became pretty wild, but I think it was a little bit slower burn, like most things, right? An overnight success, but that person's been working for the last 8 years at his stand-up, or right, as an actor or whatever. It felt overnight, but it was a slow burn.
Yeah. Now tell me about when you took over for friend of the program, Terrell Ivory, to be the Dobo. That's usually the first step for guys that want to get into college coaching. And to me, looking at it from the outside, it looks like a logistical nightmare. Tell me what it's like to be a Dobo, and like once again, what the biggest challenges were in doing that.
Yeah. It's different now a little bit. My brother was Dobo at Vanderbilt for the previous 2 seasons under Stackhouse before they got let go. Now, a lot of differences there, SEC versus at the time SoCon, right? But also 2022, 2023 versus 2012, 2013. So it's a little bit different now. I think there's a piece of it at the time that for me, I was able to do so many things in the program, but I wasn't on the court coaching. I wasn't out on the road recruiting, right? That's how the NCAA rules worked at that point in time. And so I consider myself really lucky. When I got hired, I think I was the youngest on staff person in the nation, right, at the Division I level, and felt really blessed by that. I started college at 17, got hired at 21. Like that was pretty remarkable. And it is a lot of logistics. It's a ton of logistics. And we were really blessed. A woman, Susan Mercer, is the admin assistant for Davidson basketball, and still a really good friend. And he makes that all the wheels run from when I first got there to present day. And so Susan handled a lot of the Dobo things sort of preemptively, the actual scheduling of hotels, working with the charters or commercial airlines, all of that. And so I'd be in a lot of those processes, but Susan was the boss there. And then at Davidson, my role was really a lot more of sort of video coordinator and then travel, right? Travel manager. And so it was a lot of the logistics of sort of admin assistant work, data entry, making sure our recruiting databases were up to date, calling for transcripts at Davidson. We weren't going to go see any high school student if we didn't have a transcript for him. That was just how we operated, how we had to operate with our admissions process. And so it was a lot more of, it wasn't so much, I think a lot of Dobos say, oh, the travel piece is the headache. I was a little bit lucky because it was only a headache when we were actually doing it, because I was the point person, but the prep piece, Susan took care of. In some ways, I was really fortunate that I was watching hours and hours and hours of film. I was really learning the X's and O's, the on the court part, in a way that some Dobos don't get to do, right? Depending on how their program is structured. So that was great. I think also that you have the piece where I didn't play in college. And so there is a little bit different layer of how you prove yourself, right? I don't have a career to sort of step back on and say, I know the game X, Y, and Z. And so again, it was, how do you make yourself indispensable? What do you do that can take some pressure off of your assistants, off of your head coach in whatever way, so that I could start to build a career that spoke for itself from a coaching standpoint, because I didn't have the extra piece of playing. So, yeah.
Love it. And then tell me how you got to Millbrook then. What was the career progression on that?
Yeah. I started to realize that hoops is awesome. College basketball is great. 364 days a year of basketball. And I started to realize that I maybe had some other interests, mental health. Now I'm a licensed clinical social worker, right? Started to feel that itch. I didn't have the language at that point to know what I was interested in. I just felt maybe there was something else. And then I think I started to think about, at the same time, sort of what I saw my dad do when working with a little bit younger student athlete, and thinking about how maybe I was a little bit more geared to work with teenagers than young adults. And then I have a type of arthritis and autoimmune illness, and it hit during my second year at Davidson. It's really when it started to show up for me. And so I was going back and forth up to doctors at NYU a little bit. And so there's a life piece of it as well that I just didn't know if college coaching was sustainable. So started to just reach out to some people, look at prep schools, And our current head of school at Millbrook at the time, he was director of admissions. His wife played volleyball at Davidson. And so just through some Davidson connections, Landry Kosmowski now at Swarthmore said, hey, I think this school is looking for someone. They happen to need a Spanish teacher. I was a Spanish major in college. It just sort of all clicked at the same time. So I happened to be up in New York seeing a doctor when I got the call from our now head of school. Hey, why don't you just come visit? We need a basketball coach. We're interested in really trying to build the program. Got up there, and it was a little bit serendipitous that just a lot of things clicked, within about a month. And I've been there since and met my wife there. We started the same year at Millbrook, have raising a kid here now, a 2-year-old little girl named Cora. And so I think going in, I was like, Dutchess County, New York, I'll stay for a year or two. I'll get my health stuff figured out, and I'll figure out next steps. And life has other plans. So, yeah.
That's funny. I stopped by Davidson's campus May of 2010, and I met Landry, met Matt, and so I think we probably didn't cross paths then. But what's funny is when I was in D.C., I was riding a bike and hit an SUV with my face, and was bleeding on the ground with a broken bike, waiting on an ambulance. And the person that came to help me, that was running at the time, was a volleyball player from Davidson, and Landry knew her. I can't remember her name, but interesting that Davidson volleyball players.
Yeah, there you go. Something to be
helped us out there.
Said. Something to be said.
Yep. So fun, small world. So, okay, you get to Millbrook and you do all what you just said. People out there listening that don't know about your school, your program, why don't you give us kind of an overview just to catch us all up to speed?
Absolutely. Millbrook School started in 1931, so relatively younger compared to the other prep school coaches you have, right, on the podcast. 330 students. So on the smaller side, a lot of tri-state area draw, northern New Jersey, Fairfield, Connecticut, New York City, Long Island, Westchester County, but also 19 countries represented in our student body this year. So some push for international diversity in some really intentional ways as well. When I'm out at a boarding school conference or an independent school conference, most people know us as the school with the zoo. We have an AZA accredited zoo on campus. Our zoo director is going to yell at me. I don't know the exact number of endangered species, but we've got some endangered species there. They do a lot of animal education, sustainability education, and so we're an interesting place because we pretty mainstream boarding school, right? Academic, athletic approach, artistic approach, but we also have this pretty well built up environmental bent as well, because of where we are. We're just under 800 acres of land with a lot of sort of outdoor classroom space, especially in the sciences. And then we have a pretty robust community service program that works within our campus community. So every student in some way works at our zoo while they're there. Every student works with our recycling center while they're there, on our school farm while we're there. And so you might think how the heck does this connect with the basketball piece? But I think it's really important that we've modeled our basketball program after the way that we approach our school community, which is really relational, right? We want to think about holistic humans and not just athletes. And then we want to challenge our guys to use a lot of different opportunities, whatever that might look like, right? Our best kid this year probably is Zoumana Traore. Zoo is from Harlem, never picked up a camera before he got to Millbrook. He's going to go to Brown next year, be able to take photo classes at RISD, right? Became a nationally award-winning photographer on top of a pretty darn good basketball player. So he's sort of a poster boy of, how we want to push guys to be a little bit more than just a basketball player. I'd say the only other thing I'd add is our size of school, right? We want to be really intentional about our size. So we grew in the 12 years I've been at Millbrook from about 280 to 330. And the goal there is to be of a size where we can compete and go beat, some Class A schools, some Class AA schools like we have the last few years. In a lot of things, right? Not just basketball, but also be small enough to really have an individualized approach to how we work with kids. We've got a phrase, known and needed, right? We want to really know students on campus. And I do that on the other side of what I do with our student life and our wellness programming. But then we also want them to have real roles. We want them to have jobs on campus and live in a community where they do have some real skin in the game, if you will.
Love it. Now, they do have to do other things there, like you just mentioned, but
Yeah.
do they have to play different sports or different activities like during the fall or in the
Yep.
spring?
Yep. So something every
Explain that
season.
to me.
Yeah, something every season. Our juniors and seniors in the fall, a lot of guys, if they don't have a fall sport, will be in our strength and conditioning program. And we've got a guy, Henry Zezzi, who played hoops at Stonehill, who runs that. So it suits our basketball program really well. And then we understand that, yeah, we have this mainstream boarding school model. You do something every season. And right, we also understand that part of building a life of meaning and consequence is leveraging your talents. And so, right, you might have to be out playing AAU in the spring. And so what are you going to do to help our community and still be able to do that? It might be, right, working with our athletic administration and doing things as far as running games and game management. It might be, being part of our track team and being at things when you can be, because you're a really good athlete. So, yeah, you have to do something every season. And we want to find guys who fit with our kind of community values, who embrace that while still understanding that they want to be really high-level basketball players.
Yeah, and you got competition out there that you can go to prep school and start basketball day one, and that's all you got to do, right? And I get your model, makes a well-rounded kid, and it's a lot more. And you've got kids going D1 still out of that model. So when families ask you about like open gym time or how much time I can get into the gym, or this school is in the gym 4 hours a day, like how do you answer that, Billy?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we get it, obviously, right? Just with where the market is. I think we talk about three things, right? One is we talk about the pedigree that we've been able to build and where we've sent guys within this model, right? And I think number two is honesty. This model isn't for everyone, right? If you're, not that I'm going to recruit against ourselves, but if you're a lottery pick, right, a Millbrook, a Berkshire, a Salisbury might not make sense for you, right, from a basketball standpoint. And then I think the third is really, and this is something I speak at schools, I speak with coaches, I'm going to talk at the NEPSAC ADs conference next week, like a holistic approach to education, right? And understanding that you can not live your life by scarcity. You can look at it from an abundance standpoint, which is, right, really engaging in all the things that we just talked about, really engaging in the idea that, you know what? Yeah, I can be in the gym for 4 hours, but is that going to get me every goal I have in my life? Or is that simply just me trying to make sure that people know I'm working, right? But not necessarily working effectively and efficiently. And again, not for everyone, right? If my son was, a potential top 25 pick, a potential big time college basketball player, I might be looking somewhere different, right? And I'll be really honest with families in that. I think that honesty and that authenticity has been a really good filter for our recruiting to be able to see who was going to come in and thrive in all the ways that we want our students to thrive, not just on the basketball court.
Yeah, and look, people are going to be tired of hearing me say this, but I'm always a quality over quantity guy, right? You go 30 minutes game speed in a window you've got, you can get much better than going half speed for 4 hours. So you can find time as institutions like yours that let you become more of a well-rounded human being. And to me, as an adult looking at this, like, you can only be in the gym so many hours a day, right? If I got a chance to work in a zoo or learn other things about myself, or like your player going to Brown, pick up a new hobby like photography that could change my life, as an adult, that holistic approach just is very appealing. But you got to find the right families, obviously, that are open to that.
And we still have to balance it, right? Within the NEPSAC rules, we're still allowed to do skill workouts with 3 guys. And so we're doing that in the mornings. We're playing open gym. Yes. We have colleges coming through, right? I think if I don't say all of the components of that, it can feel a little Pollyanna, but right, we're still doing all these things that are really valuable in a 2024 world with college basketball and people wanting to play college basketball. Our argument is you can have that and still do a lot of other things that enrich your life and enrich your relationships as well.
All right. One question I get from a lot of families is that, hey, I want to go high academic D3 or go to the Ivies, right? And you right now have a player getting ready to go to Brown, or he's at Brown now. But does it matter, though, what prep school you go to if you want to go high academic? Like, let's say you're qualified to get in some of these institutions and a coach likes you. Does it matter if you're at a Millbrook or at a basketball academy or more of a NEPSAC school that is more basketball focused and not as high academic? Like, what's your opinion on this, especially since you've also been at the college rank?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Outcome-wise, no. I'll be really honest, right? I think outcome wise,
Yeah.
and I would say the only caveat to that is if you're at a place where you're actually in accredited classes, right? There are some real fly by night programs that maybe don't prep you the way academically you want, or you should be prepped. You need to be prepped from NCAA rules standpoint, right? So outcome, if I'm just looking at outcome, no, probably not, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I think though that you want to be successful once you're at that Ivy or at that NESCAC or at that UAA school. And so I again would support, right, the idea that experience matters, right? Probably the word I hear more than anything else from families who are just learning about what boarding school is exposure, right? We don't get exposure where we are now. We don't get, right? And yeah, sure, that might be true. I'm still a believer that if you can play, you're gonna figure out a way to be seen most of the time, 99% of the time. The word I counter exposure with is experience, right? What do you want this full experience to be? And so, that means a lot of different things. And I think you can get the experience you want in a lot of the different types of boarding schools, prep schools in the nation, not just in the NEPSAC. But if you're thinking, right, okay, let's say that maybe you're not quite an Ivy League player and you're thinking about the NESCAC, you're thinking about the UAA, you're thinking about those types of schools. I think that you want to be able to show an admissions office and a coaching staff that you're going to be able to do more than tread water once you're there. And the best way to do that is to show a timeline of growth and progression, both basketball wise, both on your and on your transcripts, but also just in your community, what else you're doing. And so, that's again, maybe a little Pollyanna, but that's what I believe. So I'm going to share it.
Yeah. We just had a AAA coach on, that's like AAA coach, gushing about how they play, college rules, right? And you guys are at the B class, and you play a different system. When families ask, does it matter what class of NEPSAC I play in? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I think we're in the same space as we were for the last couple of questions, right? Is its own beast, and so
Yes.
you want to make sure, no matter where you're looking, right? You want to make sure that you're actually going to play at that level, that you're actually going to get minutes, that you're going to have a meaningful role in whatever school you're deciding to go to. And the reality is, for some kids, that means AAA is not the right fit, right? Now, I will say the college rule piece, I'm our Coaches Association president for A, B, and C. I've put forth a proposal each of the last 3 years around shifting to NCAA rules, shifting to longer games, right? I think that is something that needs to be looked at in the NEPSAC, and we need to continue to understand how that can help our college BAM athletes.
Sorry to interrupt, but what's the pushback on that, Billy?
Consistency with other sports, right? I think the fear of moving too far in a direction that is maybe a little bit less educational, a little bit more, sort of what we see in the NCAA right now. I think also you have the NEPSAC is if we think of it as a bucket, it's a bucket full of apples, oranges, wrenches, elephants, right? It's every school is really different. And so it is a really hard challenge for the NEPSAC to be able to come up with policies and procedures that fit, right? A small day school outside of Portland, Maine, and a boarding school in Dutchess County, right? And a ski academy in New Hampshire, right? And everything in between. And so there are some practical challenges there I think are real and that we've talked about. And the reality is we have to put a lot of different hats on when we have these conversations, right? The coach's hat, the athletic director's hat, the educator's hat, the parent's hat, the college coach's hat. And so being able to be dialectical and sort of see all of those different perspectives is a harder task than I think if we were just talking and BSing, right? It would be like, yeah, why aren't we at 40 minutes? But there are some other components.
Right. Okay. You got a 10th grader looking to come to Millbrook, and they don't know much about reclassifying. They don't understand it. So what's your theory when talking to families about doing a reclass 10th grade year or doing 11th, 12th, and potential post-grad? Like, how do you answer that question for them? Because it comes up so often, and it's a foreign concept to families who've never heard of this model before. So explain me how you talk to them.
Yep. So we use a few different frameworks. I think the first is that 10th, 11th, a reclass 10th, 11th, 12th, or 11th, 12th post-grad. For us at Millbrook, that's semantics, right? The reality is that you're doing 3 years in our community, and our post-grads here at Millbrook are part of our senior class. So if you want to come do 3 years at Millbrook, after you've done 2 years of high school, you're going to be in the sophomore class, right? So that we finish the way that our academic structure works, our residential life structure works. We don't have a post-grad only program in any way here at Millbrook, but we do have some post-grads on campus for various sports and some non-athletic reasons here. I think the more rich conversation is actually around what the extra year does for a child and does for a family. And I use the analogy of a plane and a runway, right? The child is a plane and the runway is how much time you have until graduation, right? And that NCAA eligibility clock ticks. And we use this analogy sort of in every domain of a teenager's life, athletically, academically, emotionally, socially, right? Just habit preparation, executive function, all of these things that make up being a successful human being, right? It's great. The obvious basketball ones are you look pretty different as an 18-year-old than a 17-year-old physically. You have another year of playing at a high level, right? You're probably playing against other college-bound players far more in a prep school setting than you do in whatever your home setting is, right? Barring a few really specific areas of the country. Right. But I think all the other pieces are also really important. So for instance, if you just took Algebra 2 as a sophomore at your old school, you're not going to take Algebra 2 your 10th grade year, right? What we would call a fourth form year at Millbrook. You're going to bump into a pre-calc class, which means you're probably going to get one level deeper in your high school studies and be that much more prepared if you want to study math in college, right? And we could apply that to any humanity class, any science class, any language class, any subject. And then I think the other piece is, and our head of school doesn't love when I use this phrase, but diet college, right? There's a component that you are going to be able to prep a little bit more, right? In a real way for living away from home, for being in a college atmosphere, for living in a dormitory, for understanding, right? We're scaffolded in a lot of ways. Kids have study hall every evening, but they're still making choices day in and day out of what they want to prioritize and what they want to be doing at given times during the day. I went to college at 17. I had none of those skills, right? Right. And that's no knock on my parents or the school I went to. Just wasn't part of what I was thinking and what we were thinking in that point of time. You know, we do alumni studies every 4 years or so. And the 3 skills that come back that alumni say they were super well prepared for: writing. That's part of just what our curriculum is in all of our humanities classes. Time management. They feel like they're getting things done more effectively, more efficiently than their classmates, maybe who weren't at boarding school, especially early on. And then the third one's a really interesting one. It really has to do with understanding like how to engage with other people in the community. I think for a lot of kids who maybe go right from their day school or their public school to college, there's an adjustment of just what are these 6 hours ahead of me where I don't have anything scheduled? Whoa, what does it mean to be in a dorm and like to be a good community member in that space, right? And so that learning curve is a little bit steeper. That might be what you're doing while you're trying to figure out what your Psych 101 lecture is about. For our kids, I think they come in with some of those skills already, so now they can dive a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, the phrase I use, you hit the ground running, both on the court
Totally.
and in the classroom.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about postgrad. So say I come to Millbrook for 1 year as a postgrad. What are the academic options, or what does their schedule look like?
Yep. So their academic options are the same as any other student who's a senior, right? So socially, residential life, they're going to live in a dorm with sophomores, juniors, seniors, postgrads. They're going to be in senior classes, and all of our senior humanities classes are elective seminar based anyway, right? So they're getting to pick what they want to take from a humanities standpoint. Math, science, language, art, they're continuing on that runway, right? So the runway is just a little bit longer. They can go a little bit deeper. A little bit of this depends on what the college prospect looks like, right? If you're a surefire scholarship level kid, it might be a little bit less important to show a well-rounded academic schedule, right? You might say, I think I want to go into journalism, so I'm going to triple up. I'm going to do 2 Englishes and a history seminar. Or you might say, I think I'm going to be pre-med, so I want to take an extra science, right? So there's a little bit more wiggle room that way. We had a kid way back, Danny Mitchell, 5 on his AP Latin, a 5 on an AB Calc, right? So he took a couple classes, learned how to play guitar, picked up Spanish, right? So he looked at it a little bit differently because he really had a good set up already on his transcript. And he knew he was going to be an academic D3 basketball player, right? So he wanted to go admissions offices, where else he could grow, what else he could do. Athletically, it's your 1 year with us. And so I think the biggest piece, right, a lot of folks come in and say, when we get at prep school, then we'll get exposure, then we'll get XYZ. But actually, the most important part is the spring and summer before you step on campus to be a postgrad with us. We want to have you already connected through our relationships with the colleges who you want to go play for. And we want you to be stepping onto campus in September with, your 3 to 8 schools who we're really targeting in September and October, right? If you step on campus at any prep school in the fall of your post-grad year and haven't done some of that work, haven't really used the spring and summer before your post-grad year, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And so that's a big piece from the basketball side of what post-grad gets you. It gets you that extra time in the AAU season, right, on the circuit, and that also that extra Rolodex of contacts that you're going to work through with us at Millbrook or wherever you're going as a postgrad.
I love this. And this is what I want to get into next, Billy. Let's say a kid commits to you in March, right, after he gets his acceptance letter. What is that next conversation you have with the family about recruiting, about elite camps, AAU? Walk me through that conversation.
Well, first, we're going to say that we're incredibly excited because we've probably built a pretty deep relationship with that family already, right? A big part of our recruiting process is getting to know each other and building a collaborative relationship. So they say they're coming early summer, late spring. They'll start to do some work with our academic office, with our counseling, college counseling office, right? Those spaces. But from a basketball component, we're educators. So we're thinking backward design. What level do you want to get to? We've already talked about whether we think that's the accurate level or not based on our appraisal as coaches. Right. So we front loaded all of that conversation. So typically for us in April, around March, April, the conversation is, all right, we think you're an Ivy League player. You think you're an Ivy League player. Here's what AAU, right? Do you have an AAU program? If so, is that hitting with the goals? Does that mesh with what your goals are? Are they playing at the events that make sense for what your level is, right? And I'll use the kid Zumana, who's a senior this year going to Brown, right? And Chase Garcia, who committed to NYU earlier this fall, right? Neither were postgrads. Both have been with us. But if they were postgrads coming in, right, their paths would veer very quickly, right? Chase was in the exact right place, playing with Riverside Hawks, playing with Zach Kuba, playing right, at those types of events that we're going to draw a lot of academic D3 players and coaches, right? And then we picked the 3 to 5 elite camps that we thought he needed to be at too. That's his schedule for the spring, summer. Boom, we had our list of 20 schools or so that I was blasting out information, video, making calls on, right? Zumana, very different. You're a scholarship level guy. We know you're a scholarship level guy. We want to leverage that for academics. So, of course, we're going to target right? The Davidsons of the world, the Patriot League schools, the Ivy League schools, Rice, those types of schools. And, right, you play with PSA. And so that's a great space. You're actually going to play a different role with them on the EYBL circuit, which is going to be a little bit more similar to your first year or two, wherever you end up in college, than his time with us here at Millbrook is, right? For us, he's our guy. We're running stuff through him, right? We're really making sure that he's getting the touches he needs. In PSA, he's the second forward off the bench, and he has to play a little bit different role. And that being able to hit both of those, all of those components is really important. I think that's a big piece. And then the last piece I think is, individually, we have to have a little bit of a conversation with the boy and the family on just the reality of the market in 2024. And we think you're this, but we need to build a structure that gives you a couple of levels of opportunity here. So if you think, right, we had a boy last year, Isaac Friedman. I thought he was an SCAC UAA player. He's now at Tufts, so he ended up being, right? But we were having the conversation of sort of what's the level right below that and what schools are we targeting and where are we reaching, right? Where are we going to reach out to and make sure that you're playing in front of a few of those Ivy League type coaches, Patriot League type coaches, maybe a couple NE10 coaches too. And so if we're doing it right, we're doing it pretty individualized, but we're being really warm in our honesty, warm in our bluntness of where the world is and where we think that kid fits.
I love this. That's so detailed. And, you have one team. You've probably got to do this for what, 3 to 5 players a year, so it's manageable. And you can really spend a lot of bandwidth doing this because this is your ultimate thing you got to do, Billy. Obviously, all the benefits you get from going to Millbrook, but people are coming here and paying money also to get to that next level. And I love how you shared your philosophy on that.
Absolutely. And I would add that I think, right, if I was coaching a college team, our X's and O's would be a little bit different, but it's the same
Yes.
way I view what we do on the court, right? Millbrook's not going to fire me for losing basketball games. Millbrook is going to be upset with me if we're not placing kids, bringing in the right kids for our community, right? And so we got to backward design what we do X's and O's wise a little bit too. So we focus a ton on skill development. We focus a ton on learning how to think the game. We focus a ton on the educational piece of watching film, understanding what that looks like at college level. Run a ton of sets because I don't need to prove how smart I am. We need to create basketball players who can go play, right, in a ball screen motion or a flex or dribble drive and can play a pressing style or a zone style, right? Because we don't know where they're going to end up collegiately, especially in today's game. So yeah, I think it fits in a few moments.
What do you think is the future of prep school basketball? How's it looking in your eyes?
I have a feeling we're going to continue to see a little bit of the split we've talked about, right? From just the idea of sort of that basketball central model and then that mainstream sort of boarding school, prep school model that has high level basketball. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think some folks who are maybe a little bit more historical in their relationship with prep school basketball decry that a little bit. But I think that the more that we see our world progress, the more that we're trying to balance individual needs and collective needs. And the way to do that, I think, is to offer people different options so that they can be intentional, right? And so I go back to what I said a few minutes ago, right? I think it's really good that the kid who's a Power 5 conference kid can go and try to change their life and their family's life by being on the court X amount of time and really diving into that skill that they can leverage to make their lives better. Just like I think it's really, really good that a Hotchkiss or a Salisbury or a Berkshire or a Millbrook exists and you can go learn how to be a part of a community if you're a kid for whom basketball is going to end sooner than later, right? And that still might be for tremendous years of college basketball, but then you're 25 and you got to figure out what else you do with your life. And so I think both of those settings are really useful. And I don't worry so much if that split happens because I think, the market exists for both of those types of educational institutions.
Yeah. Families have options. They got different options, different personalities. So yeah, I agree with you on that. How does being a social worker help you in your coaching or in your day job?
Yeah, so I do a couple of different day jobs. I work in our counseling office at the school. So I work with our students, our families, our teachers, and our faculty. I run all of our social, emotional, and wellness programming on campus. And I oversee a lot of that along with our dean of student wellness and engagement. I'm on campus today. I'm down at a private practice office that I use. I see some private practice clients day and a half a week and obviously coach. And I would say as I was going through my MSW, I was getting my license. So much of that work is introspective and understanding how you're internally organized and how you're internally working that I think has made me a way better coach. I've mellowed quite a bit, some people would say. I think really what it is I'm just using my energy in better ways, more efficient ways. I'm not a big yeller and screamer. I'm going to talk to folks. I'm going to really try to understand why they're making the decisions they're making. And with that, I've also become maybe a little less dictatorial as a head coach and a little bit more, geared towards a nice democratic republic where our kids have some say in what we do. And obviously the adults have to make decisions on some things, but ownership is really important. Agency in your life is really important. And that's sort of a central part of social work. So we've applied that a little bit more. And I think we use our time a little bit differently. Well, 6-8 years ago, coming out of Davidson, we would come back from Thanksgiving break and we would just run our kids into the ground in a 2.5 day mini camp, right? 3 that sort of thing. We'll come back this Thanksgiving break, just like we had the last 5 or 6. And we'll have a shoot around just to get the rust off that first night. But then the next 15 hours or so is classroom work. We teach each other about our family systems. We teach each other about the values that we've learned from our families. We try to co-create our own values for this team's iteration based on those things that we're teaching each other. And that ability to sort of really have guys come together. Last year we had 6 different religions on a team. We had 5 different racial identities on the team, right? We had kids from 4 countries. This year we've got kids from 5 countries. Right? Like that is an important part of educating them. But I also, and this is what I'm going to present on the NEPSAC ADs next week, is I also think it makes us better as a basketball team. We win more games when we're more cohesive. And so that's really the shifts that have happened from a coaching philosophy standpoint because of my work, clinically and with social work.
And post-COVID, how are the kids doing these days? Are they doing better than the kids that were in high school during COVID? Like, what's the mental state on a whole?
Yeah, our senior class last year that just graduated in May, right? They were freshmen during the lockdown year, and so I think there's a gradation of that a little bit, right? From maybe kids who were seniors and lost their graduation because of COVID down to this last year. I think that we were really in it the couple years prior to coming out of the lockdown. The counseling space work was intense and frequent and pretty high scale. We're in a little bit better place now. I think there's a little bit more understanding from parents and from adults of what our teenagers are going through, what our adolescents are going through. And because of that, I think more schools are pivoting towards trying to be prophylactic about that and preventative about that and not sort of reactive to that. Certainly we are at Millbrook. But, I mostly see adolescents in my private practice. I obviously work with adolescents at school, and things are great. Kids are feeling the uncertainty of the future of the world. Kids are right a little bit more educated, a little bit more open to things that maybe I wasn't thinking about when I was a 15, 16-year-old. Right, more access to maladaptive coping skills like vapes, weed, and porn, and right some of those things that are really damaging. And so, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Last question. What's it take to be a guard at the D1 level?
Great questions. I'll start with where we started with Steph, vision, right? I think in this day and age, you have to be able to create in a lot of different ways. And I don't just mean with the ball in your hands. And so I know a thing that I certainly look for is how do guys see? How do they see both in the moment? How do they see what their teammates need? How do they see what's about to happen on the court? And so I think vision's number one. Obviously, there are those sort of less intangible skills like size and athleticism and all of that. But I think, if we're talking about somebody being a D1 guard, they probably had those things already. And so, I think you've got to do one thing really, really well. You better be a kid who can just stroke it, or you better be a kid who really gets you into stuff. And then if you have that one really, really good thing and vision, I think you got a good career ahead of you if you choose the right fit, school-wise, program-wise.
Love it. Couple quick hitters for you. Who's the best player you've coached against at the prep school level?
It's a really good one, man.
12 years of players to go through.
Yeah. I mean, Jermaine Samuels was really darn good. Really, really darn good. And we played them a lot just in tournaments and things. And just as a high schooler, he could do a lot of things that most high schoolers can't.
Yeah. What's your favorite movie?
When Harry Met Sally.
Okay. And what are your hobbies when you got some free time?
Do a lot of yoga. During COVID, relearned how to play piano a little bit. So I'm not great, but I'll tool around there. And right now, most of my free time is spent playing with our 2.5-year-old Cora. That's the big one. Coloring. A lot of coloring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My 6 and 3-year-old love coloring still, so I get it. Is there anything you want to mention before we go that we didn't touch base on?
No, I really appreciate you having me on, Corey. I think it's funny because a lot of, if you're in a space sitting with 5 college coaches, they'll talk about really knowing boarding school, but 1/2 of 1% of American teenagers end up going to a boarding school for for their high school experience. And so it's still a pretty unique and small environment ecosystem. And so you having some of us on talking about this, I think, is a way to continue to grow that, which is fantastic. So appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. And then we will put in the show notes where people can find you if you got any interest in Millbrook. We'll put your email up there, your social media, and feel free to reach out to Billy. Billy, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Corey. Be well.
If you guys like this, be sure to subscribe on all the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube, and sign up for the newsletter. Just go to our website, prepathletics.com. You can sign up for it there to make sure you get all the latest that's going on in the prep school world. We'll see you next time here on the Prep Athletics Podcast. Take care.